Thanks for hanging out with us for this historic moment. I'm a little weepy right now.
I'm emotional.
I have some eye sweat.
I'm completely.
I'm not going to lie to you.
I can't believe.
It's like the birth of one of my 17 kids. It's just so exciting. Tony Penty, OriolesHangout.com, Terry Ford, 105.7 The Fan. Tony and I have done radio segments together forever, and we've always talked Oriole baseball, Oriole news, prospects, whatever the case. And then, so Tony and I were talking, and we were like, you know, we're two of the best-looking guys in Baltimore.
I mean, clearly.
Without a doubt. So why limit us to radio?
I mean, these faces should not be just on the radio.
No.
Clearly.
We should share these with you. And so we are. And we decided Orioles Hangout Talk, your first installment, the historical first episode. We're going to start when we're going to talk about prospects in a little bit. But before we get to that, we have some big Oriole news. I guess the biggest Oriole news and the best Oriole news I've heard in a while. I don't know about you. No offense to Dan Duquette or anybody else, but the Orioles bring in Mike Elias as the executive vice president, general manager of the team. Personally, I think it's a home run hire. You have a guy who cut his bones in scouting, a guy who then went to Houston and learned all about the cutting-edge analytics that they do with the Astros. Part of a world championship organization with the Cardinals, world championship organization with the Astros, knows scouting, knows analytics, knows the international market. I mean, again, nothing's 100%, but I think this was the right guy at the right time for the O's.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a tremendous hire when you look at this is something completely different that we've ever seen from the Orioles in the past. And you got to give credit, I think, to John and Lou Angelos for going through this process. I was a little critical on how long it was taking. They were very silent the whole time as this was going about. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. At the end of the day, they hit a home run. They had a guy who is well respected throughout baseball. He's an up-and-comer. We've never seen the Orioles go in this direction. A guy who's on the cutting edge, who has already tentacles out in the international scene. He already understands it. He knows the agents. These are all things the Orioles have never in the past. So the fact that the Orioles have gone in this direction just goes to show me that the whole organization is going to get refreshed now. I think everyone's going to get a second wind. Hopefully, he evaluates the guys that are already in the organization, identifies who can still help him in the future, and brings in his guys from outside. And it's got to be exciting for the Oriole fan at this point.
And the thing that myself as an Oriole fan and I know you will agree, is when we hear that he will have total autonomy to make all the baseball decisions. It's his way or the highway. It's his philosophy. Everybody's in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. Any dumb cliche you want to throw out, for the first time in a long time, we have a true decision maker sitting on top of the organization, setting the philosophy and direction.
And that leads to no factions, and that's what's happened in the past. There was always something going on.
What was your you described it? Game of Thrones.
Oh, the Game of Thrones, right? The Game of Thrones this year, right? It was like, who was going to win? Was it Buck's faction? Was it Dan Duquette's faction? Was it ownership's faction? Brady Anderson had his own faction. Everybody seemed like they were pulling in different directions. And now what you're going to see is everyone is going to work for Mike Elias if you're working in the baseball arena. And that is so important because he can hold people accountable. There's no runarounds back to the owner and trying to influence it. And I think that's one thing I took out of the press conference yesterday was John and Lou basically saying, this is our guy, we're going to let him do this. And I'll tell you one thing I saw right after they finished up everything, they said, we're going to go one-on-one now. We're going to let one-on-one. Well, I thought John and Lou was going to stick around. Let me tell you right now, they stood up for pictures, and they hightailed it, left Mike out there, and they were like, we met one-on-one with Mike Elias. Yeah. So I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was great, and I think it definitely right now, like you said, there's a new sheriff in the town. His name is Mike Elias.
Absolutely. By the way, in the factions of the Game of Thrones, I was in the Oriole Bird faction at that point.
Oh.
Well, I was picking between...
Did they have the dragons? Was that the dragons coming in with the Oriole Bird?
You did see the one time, like the naked girl flying on the dragon going through the hallway, like on Game of Thrones?
That was the side I was on, by the way. I just want to get that out clear. Real clear.
I think you picked the intelligent side, my friend.
Yeah,
so what we're going to do, and we'll talk obviously more about Mike Elias and what he's going to do moving forward in the different episodes of Oriole Hangout Talk. But let's get to the prospects, because you put together the top 30 prospects every year. And we're going to go through the top 10 today and maybe talk about some up-and-comers of guys who have slid down the prospect ladder, so to speak. So we'll get to that, starting off with the top 10 of the prospects with the Orioles. And obviously you do, again, top 30. But we'll just focus on the top 10 right now. So first of all in the top 10 is Brendan Hanafy. He's number 10, 19-year-old pitcher. 19 years old it's good to be in the top 10 at 19, correct?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, Brandon Hanafy is a guy that really came on this year. He was I think a third or fourth round pick. I'll have to go back and check on that. But at the end of the day, he was right out of high school. Good, hard, sinking fastball, and this is what everyone loves. Plus, he looks like everything you want out of a pitcher: big, broad shoulders, solid, put together. You know, still has a little bit more room to fill out, but this guy looks like a horse. He's going to be able to hold his stuff. He 91 to 93, tops out 94, 95 on occasion. But the thing about it, it's a heavy fastball. His all-speed stuff right now is the slider. That's his main pitch. It can flash plus, so we've seen a flash plus slider in there. We've seen this heavy fastball that misses bats even in the zone, and you know, he's starting to work on a changeup. Right now, when I look at this guy and I start talking with folks around, the guy that comes to mind is Scott Erickson. When you start looking at Scott Erickson, what he looked like probably when he was 19, I'm going to guess looked a lot like Brandon Hanafy. So this is why we've moved him up for a lot. I think he was in our 20 to 30 last season, somewhere in there. This year we were like, you know what, this guy's got a chance to be maybe a third or fourth starter if everything hits for him, the changeup comes around. But the worst case, the reason why we really like him is the ceiling is very low. In other words, the fact is that this guy can go into and become a reliever without a doubt with those two pitches alone. If that changeup never comes in, the things don't kind of work, consistency or whatever, you're going to look at this guy like, hey, let's go out to the bullpen. You're going to have yourself an impact reliever.
And the good news about a 19-year-old, last time I checked, they're still growing.
Right.
And he can get bigger and stronger, and fastball velocity can go up, and maybe a guy that's throwing in the lower 90s can be going mid-90s by the time he's 21, 22 or whatever,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of the things you always look for when trying to project these guys out a little bit, is you want to be able to look at those guys and say, what is this guy going to be when he gets there? And for me, you're looking at a guy who's built exactly like you want your starters to be built. He's already got two pitches that you can see that work in the major leagues. Again, what do we have to look for? Can that third pitch come around? That probably is going to be the indicator whether he can be a starter or whether he's going to have to go out to the bullpen.
So Brandon Hanafy is number 10. And by the way, in your top 10, 7 of your top 10 are pitchers.
Yeah.
An organization that needs pitching help.
Not
7
bad.
out of 10 is pretty good, right?
Not bad, not bad. And again, this is the 10th guy. We got some more guys to talk about.
All right, so Brandon Hanafy is number 10. To number 9, just drafted last year, Blaine Knight, had a great college career at Arkansas. Feel free.
You know, what I really love about him, and it's very rare for us to put a guy just drafted that wasn't a first or second rounder, you know, to put him up this high. Because normally what we look at is, you know, you're looking for these guys at real high end, and you want to see them put little stats up in the minor leagues. And obviously he barely had a chance to do that because of his long college season. What we really like about Blaine Knight is everything we heard about him from player development, from other scouts, and from watching video and watching him in college. First off, just scouting-wise, he's a 4-pitch guy already. The fastball is a 91 to 94 pitch. He's been known to even hit higher at times. This guy is a string bean. It makes you look like you know, you're like Santa Claus over there.
That's
how
under this,
bad.
I'm buff. You understand that, right?
I'm
been
just
to the gun
saying.
show, Penty.
I know
Don't
you
screw
have
with me.
been,
Don't screw
clearly.
with me.
But you know, Blaine Knight, he's set up a guy who could add velocity. The command is outstanding, and that's what we look at. All 4 of his pitches he can throw for strikes. The curveball and slider. The slider has been a strikeout pitch for him even in college. The Orioles said, look, it depends on the day. That sometimes the curveball is even better than the slider. So you have a guy that can flash you a plus break and stuff. The changeup also has missed bats in his hand. And I tell you right now, I didn't hear a lot about that, but I watched the videos of the changeup. I saw a changeup that had some depth to it, had some drop. I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, to me, if you throw strikes with that pitch, that's a 4-pitch guy. So you're looking at a 21-year-old kid who has 4 pitches, and on top of it, everybody talks about how intelligent this guy is. He already reads bats. He already looks at how a batter's swinging. Those are really important aspects when I hear those things, because those are the kind of things that tell me his aptitude, what is he going to be able to learn, he'll get the most out of his talent. So I tell you what, and I think the Orioles may have hit a home run on that draft pick.
Okay, and you bring up the from the neck up deal. And one of the things I always talk about in pitching is we never really talk enough about the neck up. Because to me, what makes a great pitcher, everybody's good with their A stuff. Remember, Daniel Cabrera was good with his A stuff. You remember Daniel Cabrera. He was great with the B game, C game. He's hitting kids in the box seats with fastballs, taking out windshields, because he had no plan B or C.
Right.
And a kid that's got that high pitching IQ goes out there, he's going through the first time in the order, he says, okay, my fastball, I'm not really, my location isn't what it is, or my curveball is kind of slurvy right now. I got to move, and maybe I got to throw my changeup more, or go to a cutter. So you're saying he's got a high baseball IQ that he can go to the mound, and by the first, second, third inning, he's figuring out how to get through the order.
Absolutely. One of the most important attributes of a pitcher is for them to know what's working that day and what they can use. You're never going to have all 4 of those pitches in one day. If you do, that's his day. He's probably throwing that one hitter, and everybody's going to think he's the greatest pitcher you've ever seen. It just doesn't happen. I mean, on a consistent basis. They're going to be lucky if they have 2, maybe 3 pitches working that day. The fact he already has 4 of them, and he's smart enough to realize this isn't what I can use at this point. He also is the kind of guy that can look and say, you know what, I just saw the way that hitter reacted. Even though this might not be my best pitch today, in this situation it is my best pitch. And that's very good. Now, granted, catchers nowadays obviously are learning as they get to the pro level, because before the pro level, almost all these catchers are having their games called for them by their coaches.
Right.
In college and in high school. Every time you get a pro catcher, they have to learn on the job. So sometimes these pitchers are ahead. They've been doing this their whole lives. So it's real good to have a smart pitcher like Blaine Knight to be able to have that attribute going forward.
And the last thing about Blaine Knight before we move on, I know he was in the College World Series. Please didn't tell me he threw 1 billion pitches in the College World Series like Ben McDonald did at LSU.
No, or Bo Hale. Bo Hale was a perfect example when he was at University of Texas. If you guys remember, former first-round pick, he was throwing 150, 160 pitches at times.
Throwing left hand, right hand. Yeah, it was crazy.
And the poor guy got to the Orioles organization, and he was just gone. But no, they handled him pretty well. He was able to. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier was he did maintain his stuff going into 100 pitches. You would watch his stuff at 90 to 100 pitches, and it looked a lot like that pitch early on. And that's another thing you look for a guy who can hold that stuff going on.
All right, now we get to number 8 in the Orioles Hangout, Tony Penty Top 10 Prospects for 2018. Hey, look, another pitcher. Now, Zach Lothar is at number 8. Now, this is the kind of guy that drives me nuts. First of all, he's a lefty. That's good.
Right.
He throws about 46 miles an hour.
But little harder.
Okay, so 88, 89, 90. So he's not a hard thrower. Nothing special about his stuff, but his arms are about this long. He's very deceptive in his delivery. So his minor league numbers are off the charts.
Oh, they've been amazing, haven't they?
So it makes me go, wow, I'm excited about this guy when you look at his minor league numbers. But then I start reading the scouting reports, and I go, help me feel better about Zach Lothar, Tony Penty.
So there's something to be said about these numbers. And granted, you can't just look at them in a vacuum and say this is what the guy's going to be. But they do mean something, especially when you're dominating, okay? You also have to look at how they're dominating with those numbers. If you see guys, in other words, I've seen guys with really high strikeout numbers, right? And you go watch them, and you find out that they're throwing fastballs by guys, and young hitters are just chasing it, or they're throwing curveballs in the dirt, and young hitters are chasing it. Those are pitches that major league hitters won't do, right? So you go, okay, they're having success because the hitters aren't good. But when you see a guy like Zach Lothar, you see a guy, again, who knows how to pitch. A lot of things we talked about Blaine Knight, you can just go ahead and start, again, saying about Zach Lothar. Very smart pitcher, understands what he's doing. He's kind of guy that, again, if you go see him one time as a scout, you're going to walk away going, yeah. You watch him 2 times, you go, You watch him a 3rd time, you go, I think we might have something. By the 4th time you watched him, you're thinking, I think I believe in this guy. And that's kind of what you see. The more you see of this guy, the more he ends up growing on you. The statistics, obviously, are fantastic. He's missing bats, and that's a big key there, too. So he's missing bats with pitches. He's not getting guys to chase junk. He's just able to use a lot of different pitches, has pretty good command of those pitches around the zone. Command still had to be something all young pitchers still have to be able to improve upon. Control-wise, very good of all 4 pitches, can throw or all 3 pitches, can throw strikes with them. So he's a guy that, again, the drawback to him and why he's 8 and not higher with the numbers you saw is that I think we need to see him do it at a higher level, right? That big jump next year is the one he's going to, the AA jump. That's the important one. When you see him hit the AA and all of a sudden his numbers start sticking where they're at, people are going to start getting excited about Zach Lothar. If he gets there and suddenly the hits per innings come up, the walks come up, the strikeouts drop, then you start wondering, is the stuff as good as we saw? Is it, it's not playing as well? I always say the hitter will tell you how good that pitcher is ultimately. No matter what you see as a scout, no matter how many times you see a guy, no matter how much movement you see, at the end of the day, look down there with the hitters. Do they look comfortable in there, or do they look like they really don't want to hit against this guy? And I think in this case, this is a guy in which hitters don't necessarily look uncomfortable all the time, but they go back shaking their head as they're on their way back to the plate like, I don't know how he just got me out, but he did it.
Okay, now, he's 22 years old. Is he a guy that could tick up in velocity at some point, or is he pretty much what he is when it comes to, not the velocity's everything, but if you're throwing maybe 91, 92, those couple extra miles per hour might help you out compared to 88, 89. Any chance of that?
Yeah, he's got a pretty mature body, so you don't always expect a lot of additional velocity at this stage. He's 22 years old, he'll be 23 next year. We have seen him, I've heard reports of him touching 94 on occasion, so he's got a little bit more in there. So it's not like he's just an 89, 90. He's sat a lot last season between 89 and 91. Sometimes had 92 days when the velocity was a little better. And then all of a sudden he has that little extra gear occasionally where he can hump it up 93, 94. So, I think there is I think if he ended up going to the bullpen at some point, you see a little bit more velocity out of a guy when they do that. You see a little uptick there, but this isn't a guy with a long, lanky body that you say when the butt fills out, all of a sudden that velocity is going to go. This guy's already filled out.
Okay, so the 94 mile an hour day, was that the same gun that gets the tree at 76 miles an hour? Is that the same gun?
You have to be really careful in those gun readings. I've seen this before where say, well, he's touched. That's my favorite thing, touched these velocities. Because then I'm always like, do you mean your radar gun got a bad reading? He was 94, was he 91, 91, 91, 91, 94, 91, 91, 91? He's a 91 guy, okay? But I think what I was hearing from them, I think I got the touch numbers actually from the Orioles organization. They're usually pretty good about not the guys I know and don't over-exaggerate for me because they know I'll check them. Right. So, it's pretty, I think he's a guy that's going to sit probably a solid 90, 91, and then he's going to have that good off-speed stuff and use his pitchability.
Because I'm thinking, I can just picture, 94 for Zach. My hot dog just went 86. All right, maybe it's not a good day for the gun.
No.
All right, so Zach Lothar sitting at number 8, 3 straight pitchers. Tony Pentina, out of those first 3, who's got the biggest upside?
Upside-wise, I think Hanafy's still that guy with the upside. If I had to say one guy that I think could possibly touch something more than what we kind of think where he'll end up, is him just because he's so young and there's still some more growing in there. This guy might come back and all of a sudden he's sitting 94, 95 instead of 91 and 93. Well, you got a different guy with a 93 to 95 sinking fastball. Then you start getting into Zach Britton velocity, and he's got a very similar sink as Zach Britton. It has some upside run to it, and it's a heavy sink. It's not just a late, and it's late. And that's what Zach Britton had. If you ever watch Zach Britton, it's not just as a sinker. Sinkers have that very late break, and that's why guys can't lay off it. They look fastball, 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 and then it dies on them. That's what this guy's fastball does.
And out of these 3, with Hanafy and Lothar and Knight, do you see all 3 being in the rotation one day? Anybody higher than a number 3? Or do you see lower rotation, bullpen?
Yeah, I think these guys at this level, obviously Knight, I want to see more of. Everything oozes that he's going to be a starter. But again, I got to see him as he moves up, how the upper level hitters adjust to his stuff as he gets there. If I had to say one guy I think will stick as a starter no matter what, I would say probably it's going to be Knight. Because I definitely see Hanafy as a guy who definitely can go to that bullpen. And Lothar's just a guy, the numbers are great. We've seen some good stuff. We've seen some good outings. People are starting to really grow on him. So he's kind of a wild card in this. But, again, I think if I had to say who do you think is going to be a starter in the major leagues, it's probably going to be Knight.
Okay, so we've gone through 10, 9, and 8. Now we're to number 7.
This guy we may know.
And I'm going to pause after I say his name so we all can groan. Hunter Harvey, 1, 2, 3. Oh.
I feel bad, though. Yeah. Because, again, being a father myself, I've had a son who was a higher level wrestler, as you know, and he was a guy that got recruited in the University of Maryland, very well thought of, 2-time All-American, gets there and his shoulders kind of let out on him. It wasn't from a lack of trying. It wasn't from a lack of desire. Kid tried harder than anybody you ever want to see to try to rehab himself, and just one thing after another led to his career not being what it wanted to be while he was in college. So I have a lot of empathy now when I see guys like Hunter Harvey, because it's not a situation that we're looking at, this kid doesn't care, or he's not trying. He's had one sometimes freak injury after another. And when you can only imagine having the talent that Hunter Harvey has, and let's not other than DL Hall, I think at this point there's nobody in this organization has the talent level and stuff of Hunter Harvey when he's on. So there's still a ton of talent invested in this young man, but as why we talked about this at the very beginning, can he stay healthy?
Absolutely. And the other part about Hunter Harvey, first of all, I know what you're saying because my oldest son was the best at breaking and entering in Essex. You know what he did?
It's good to be known for something.
Cracked his forearm, ruined everything, and he had to move on and go to college, and it was just awful. We were so disappointed in the family. But with Hunter Harvey, that's the frustrating part. In an organization, remember, he was part of the Big Four. Mm-hmm. He was part of the, you had, Dylan Bundy, you have Kevin Gossman, you had Eduardo Rodriguez, you had Hunter Harvey. Yep. But as a matter of fact, the only time in the last decade the Oriole organization was in the top half in baseball because of those 4 pitchers were all top 100s.
Yep.
So Hunter Harvey, and out of the 4, a lot of people thought Hunter Harvey because of his father, Brian Harvey, mm-hmm. longtime reliever, closer,
yep.
because of his makeup, because of, again, his dad, and because of his ceiling and just what people had seen when he pitched, they thought he might be the best of the 4 possibly when it all was said and done. And you can't get him on the mound. I mean, dislocated his shoulder ducking from a foul ball last year.
Right. I mean, he just could never catch a break. But the thing about it is, you can go watch him, and he'll sit 95 to 97 miles an hour. He'll touch 99 miles an hour on times. He'll throw you a plus curveball that guys are swinging, looking like Bugs Bunny up there, swinging 3 times as they miss it in the zone. The stuff can wow you at times. Scouts, every time they go see him, they're like, if this guy can just keep this and keep healthy and get there, he's a guy. Now, there's some command issues still with him. He hasn't had a lot of innings to really develop. The Orioles had to put him on the 40-man roster last season, so now he's kind of burning. He's going to burn another one this year where option. And you only get 3 of them. And he's going to burn another one this year. So this is going to be a situation at some point. Is it going to be similar to Bundy, where all of a sudden, he's not really maybe ready to be in the major leagues, but you're going to have to put him in there because you're going to be out of options and you don't want to lose him. And I always wonder that situation, is that what kind of caused Dylan Bundy to be where Dylan Bundy is right now, which is nowhere near where the Orioles thought he was going to be when they drafted him way back when. So with Hunter Harvey, though, I think in my mind here, the Orioles have to make a decision. And this is going to be very interesting when Mike Elias looks at this system. He looks about how I'm going to be very interested to see how he handles Hunter Harvey, because the Orioles want to keep keeping him as a starter. They want to keep running him out as a starter, and they want to develop him as a starter. At some point, he's 23 years old now. Okay, you can look at the grades. Okay, if I go down here, you look at the ceiling grade. When the ceiling grade for me is 60, a 60 ceiling grade for me is an elite closer. And there's also being a good solid third starter is a 60 grade for me as well. But a 60 tells me this guy can be a dominant closer. And I think at this point, you got to just go, you know what? I think it's time to throw him in a bullpen. And I think maybe for 1 year in the minor leagues, you're going to throw him out every 2 to 3 days, sometimes doing back-to-back, see if you can get him stretched out to 2 or 3 innings at times to get him to develop those pitches. But let's see, because you only got another 2 years, really, before he's going to have to stick in Baltimore. And do you want to risk again that you're going to put him out there in a rotation again and something else doesn't go on? And on top of it, he's built kind of lanky. He doesn't really strike you as a guy. He hasn't put on a lot of weight. He hasn't put on a lot of things that you were hoping to see. So at this time, you start looking at this guy. This guy should maybe be a reliever. And I think it would be be a faster road for him to the big leagues. Get some value out of him. See if you can keep him healthy, number one, clearly. Okay. But I've also talked to a scout who has some concerns about him commanding glove side, which is what Kevin Gossman never could do. He could never, because he throws across his body. So there are some not red flags, but there are some things that he needs to learn how to do and develop. So next year, I'd say you put him out in the bullpen so he can learn how to do that role. And I think maybe in 2020, you have a guy you can stick in your bullpen, and you could have an elite guy at the back end of your bullpen.
And the other part of this, because baseball, because let's face it, starters now go, well, third time through the order, I think I'm done, Skip. So there's that middle inning, 2 to 3 inning kind of weapon, like Andrew Miller was a couple years ago in the postseason for the Indians. If you can develop Hunter Harvey to be that, like 2 or 3 inning, basically if your starters can give you 5, he can give you the 6th and the 7th or whatever in a dominant fashion. He could be a dominant bridge guy maybe, which is maybe not the closer at that point. He's not a starter, but you get a ton of value with him coming in there and shutting the door for 2 or 3 innings on teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely could be that guy. So I think that's something they're going to have to look at. This is going to be a big year. I'm really interested in seeing how Elias is, with him coming in, are they going to handle Hunter Harvey differently than they have in the past?
All right, Hunter Harvey at number 7. Now we move to number 6. Here's a guy who, I mean, honestly should have just stayed home. Should have stayed home in 2018. Austin Hayes, outfielder. Coming into the 2018 season, he was a top 40 prospect in baseball. Everybody, best prospect in the Orioles system. And it was a disaster from the get-go. All of a sudden, his swing was different.
Right.
He went from a guy using the entire field with power to a guy who was trying to hit every ball into the parking lot. It seemed like pitchers were using his aggressiveness against him, striking out a ton, never much of a walk guy. All of a sudden, all the things that were positive were negative, and then throw in the injuries. He did come back and kind of show more when he came back from the injuries late in the year. But here's a guy that had a lost season going into 2019 and coming off of 2018. Where are you at on Austin Hayes?
You know, Austin Hayes, again, I think it was a lot of his struggles last season were injury-related. He had a lat problem in spring training. Lat problems can really screw up hitters and pitchers as well, obviously. But I think it put him back. I think it's real hard for young players when they feel like they're on the cusp. Remember, he got caught up at the end of last season. Probably shouldn't have been, but had to keep him on the 40-man roster earlier than they needed to. Probably not great roster management, but they wanted to give him a little bit of taste. And when you get that taste, they're like, I'm a big leaguer, and I don't want to go back to the minor leagues. And they should think like that. Nobody should want to go back to the minor leagues. But I think he had the injuries. I think he felt like, I got to push through this. I think it started kind of just, all of a sudden, it just started steamrolling him. He went out, and I think he also saw that, hey, you got to have an uppercut swing. Let's hit some home runs.
Exit velocity.
Right. Let's start looking at all this stuff. I think he started overthinking things. I think he got overly aggressive. And I think what you end up having was a guy who started off really awful, and then all of a sudden the ankle injury happens, the ganglion cyst occurs, and it just never got right for him. The good news is the talent is still there. You know, it's not like this is a guy that you went, oh, they figured him out. I don't think he figured anything out. I think he had a lot of issues that made him have a really bad year. So for me, yes, did he drop down in our rankings because he was #1 last season? Yes, drop it down to 6. Partly because he had a bad season, but also partly because there's some new guys that are coming on right now that we're about to go talk about anyway.
And you love this guy.
I did.
I remember last year we were talking, it was almost kind of a creepy man crush restraining order kind of thing you had on Austin Hayes. You loved him. You told me this guy's a major leaguer.
And he was smart. He's a great young man, #1 on top of it. He's a hard worker. You never heard anything bad about this kid. He's the kind of kid you want to root for as he's coming up. So I liked a lot of things I saw. The bat speed was good. Again, the skill set's there. The arm out in right field is going to be fine. Defensively, he's always never been a superb route guy, but he's quick enough to make up for it, so he's not going to hurt you out there. He's going to be fine. He's going to hit for some average. He's got good plate coverage in his swing. So, and the power. And I think you're going to start seeing, yes, I know about launch angle and everything like this, but there's some other things they're working on to create backspin with some of their hitters now. And Jeff Manto is a hitting instructor. It's down to minor leagues. He's been doing a lot of work with hitters. Some other folks that are also that were out in the instructional league this year. Hayes is another guy that they're trying to work on that thing. So, again, he's a very good line drive hitter. I think they want to start seeing a little bit of backspin to see if we can get some carry on that. I think you'll see more home runs from him at that point. But he's still a guy people need to be paying attention. That's why he's still #6 on our list.
Absolutely, and there's a point I want to get to with the next guy to go with Hayes, because they kind of work together. Mm-hmm. Watch how I do. This is going to be really fancy.
This is
You're
great.
going to watch. It's going to be really fancy.
What a segue.
Because #5 is Unicel Diaz, and I think I got his name right.
Uzneo.
What did I say?
You said Uzneo. I don't know.
How about ready? How about Uzi Diaz? How about Diaz?
Diaz.
I tell you what, you say the first name, I'll say the last.
Okay.
Ready?
I could have it wrong. Uzneo.
Diaz. That's
there
#5. So I take Diaz, and I'll get to my point about Diaz and Hayes together in a minute, but Diaz was obviously the big key in the Manny Machado trade. He was the only top 100 prospect the Orioles got in all those deals. As a matter of fact, there was only 2 top 100 prospects that were even traded at the deadline. Francisco Mejia went from Cleveland to San Diego in the Brad Hand trade. So Diaz was a very highly thought of prospect, not one of the best Dodger prospects. Well, he was like 3rd or 4th in the Dodger system. So the Orioles get this guy Toolsy, we hear, and he's got a lot of huge upside. You've seen him play. It was a bumpy road once he got in the Oriole organization. Talk about the bumpy road and talk about what you think of Diaz.
Yeah, you know, Diaz is definitely one of those guys that when he first got here, I think everyone expected this wow guy, right? You got him from Machado. He was supposed to be the crown jewel of that. And I think when he first got here, there was a little bit of disappointment tools-wise. They thought it was solid above the, you know, not their bad tools, but there was nothing that jumped out at anybody and went, wow, this guy's going to hit 30, 40 home runs. Wow, this guy's going to steal 30, 40 bases. Wow, this guy's going to hit 320. It's more of a, hey, I think this guy's got a lot of things that he still needs to work on, but there's a lot of talent in there to do that. And the plate discipline's a big part for him. That's what really kind of gives him that kind of, you know, that step up in the prospect status over maybe some other guys have similar skill sets to him, because he knows how to control the strike zone. He's not swinging a lot of bad pitches. He doesn't strike out a ton. Those are all really good things to have as you're going up. And he's only 22 years old in Double-A. So he's a guy that I think that has a real solid chance of being a regular, everyday outfielder. And maybe that sounds disappointing, but no, I mean, you're getting a guy that's going to play every day for you and an upper-level area. So I don't think he's a low-end guy. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to hit for some average. I think he's going to be a guy that there's some question on the power. Is he 12 to 15? Is he a 15 to 20 guy? Can it develop some? The Orioles, again, we're talking about backspin. The Orioles were working on him as well. He hit the ball very hard, but on a much different angle. And again, they're trying to create the backspin so he can get some carry, because you can go to BP and watch him at BP, and you start seeing plus. You can see some nice plus raw power, but he wasn't able to really put that into the game. He was also a guy that when he first got here, I think he was very much like, hey, I'm the guy who just got traded for Manny Machado. And he had a reality check, and I won't go into the exact story.
Oh, please go in.
That goes into it.
Reality check.
But I will tell you that his manager, Double-A, had a reality check with him. But the good news in this is he basically got benched in the middle of a game. I won't go into the whole situation, but he got benched in the middle of a game. And instead of pouting, Gary Kendall's the Double-A manager. Gary brought him into the office, which is one of the things that Gary's very good at doing. Instead of just letting him stew on it and think, you know, it's my way to highway, he brings the young man into his office, and they talk about it. And he's like, "You're just not going to do these things here." And to Diaz's to his credit, he turned around. It's like, "You're absolutely right. I'm not going to." And they said from that point on, the kid was running out, doing everything he was supposed to do. Right. So that's the good thing you see about these kids, okay? I think a little bit of myself. I got traded for Manny Machado. I'm a top 100 prospect. I kind of do what I want. Got the reality check, but instead of, you know, there's plenty of guys that get that reality check and then they go the opposite way with it. This is a guy that learned from it, did that. So I think that's a really good thing to learn about him and know that that's something you can think that he'll take his talent. I think he'll reach his ceiling because of that kind of maturity.
Two quick points before we move on from Diaz. One, and to go to Austin Hayes. The Houston Astros, with the analytics and the things they do, one of the things I read about that they did was they're big on swing planes for hitters. They have, in their analytic database built by, you know, Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory, was that they look at swing planes on draftable players, high school, college. There is a certain swing plane they draft. If you are not in that swing plane, or they don't think they have the ability to get you in that swing plane, they won't draft you.
Right.
And that's one of the things. You've seen the success they've had with Alex Bregman and Carlos Correa, just to name a couple. So they're big on swing plane. Now, with Diaz and with Hayes, and I'll ask you this, obviously you're not going to totally change a guy's swing, but with what they did moving forward into the Orioles organization, that obviously Mike Elias was part of in Houston, could you, because I could see them tweaking the swings of Diaz and Hayes to get them more in tune with what they saw analytically in successful hitters and swing planes. Could you see that in some way, shape, or form?
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that you look at the excitement of bringing this guy in because of those very things. Not only Diaz and Hayes from a minor league level, but look at a guy like Trey Mancini at the major league level. Trey Mancini won. It's a tremendous amount of ground balls. Sometimes they're hard ground balls and he gets singles out of them. But this guy, you want to talk about a guy with an awful, just an awful launch angle, it's Trey Mancini. And that hurts his power. This is why this guy, if you watch the home runs he does it when he connects, they're out of here. They're rockets. When he gets out and he puts it on the right launch angle. So I think he's another guy that you may see next year with a new system coming in and see how he makes that adjustment. He's a guy as well that you might want to look at next year to see if that power increases.
And the last thing about Diaz and Hayes before we move on. We talk about the Orioles have a glut of outfielders, center field, corner outfielder types, whatever. Well, you know, Diaz, you talk more about as being a corner outfielder who can run around in center a little bit, but he's really well suited for the corner more than center. Sure. Austin Hayes, same guy. We watched Cedric Mullins on the major league level. He might be better suited in a corner. Who's the center fielder of the future? Is it Ryan McKenna, who we're not really going to talk about a ton today? Was it Ryan McKenna?
No, most likely not. I mean, he's probably the best defender in center field of the crew. I think there's some potential there with McKenna. I think that's still there. I think Mullins is your center fielder for right now. I think he's probably best bet long-term, a left fielder, a guy that probably could be a very good left fielder out there. And mainly Mullins' issue is really a lot of it's arm-related. He has a very low, below-average arm for center field. Runners are going to continue to run on him. There's going to be some issues there, and he's not actually, if you look at some of the advanced metrics defensively, Mullins didn't come off that great the first year. And now some of it may be it's the first time he's consistently catching balls out of the upper deck, the lights coming to major league level. There's a lot of things that affect a guy. So I want to see more before I start saying Mullins not going to be a good defensive center fielder. I want to see him more in the major leagues, and we'll see that next year because I guarantee he's going to be every day. He's going to be out there every day in center field.
All right, so we've done 10 to 5. We have 4, 3, 2, 1 to go. We have also, we're going to talk about the highest risers in the top 30 and highest fallers. So we have that in our next segment and episode. Right now, we're going to slow this one down, put a halt to our first thrilling, groundbreaking episode because, to be honest, I got to go to the bathroom. So we finished up our first one. You excited? You happy?
Hey, this has been great. I mean, we're not awful. Well, I guess we'll let them decide that one.
Well, I'm not awful.
I'm
not awful.
You know.
So we finished up our first one. You going to give me a big hug, right?
No. Oh, have I 5?
Okay, we'll do that. Obviously, I'm more in tune with myself than Tony, but that's okay.
We'll hug it out after we're done.
So episode 1 in the books. Hope you enjoyed it. Episode 2 will be coming up. 4, 3, 2, and 1 out of the top 10 prospects. Then high risers and high fallers in the top 30. Tony Penty, OriolesHangout.com. Terry 41057 The Fan. Thanks for hanging out with us. Orioles Hangout Talk.